I hope that there's a sense of that connection the listener gets when they hear me singing my grandfather's words. For me, it's really about that connection back to my roots, finding that and celebrating that. Heading up to Saibai, so Saibai was where Nadi was born, that's my grandfather, is where my mother was born. Heading up to Saibai was really, I guess, about giving some kind of a visual idea of the place of birth of my grandfather, whose songs this album is based on, to kind of give a visual reference of what he was seeing. You know, this is Lag Saibai, this is my island, you know, and this is how deeply I feel for it. When you see the place, you understand the language. When you hear the language and see the place, it becomes something that's really, really real.
How come of Saibai wolf met by the light of the moon?
To think that yesterday morning I woke up in the city and then arrive here today and just be reminded, because of the weather and the smell, the untouchedness of it, you know, people, the smiles, the hellos, the embraces, and absolutely getting to share it with my daughter Zipporah as well. I've thought about how far back I can trace the concept back to being a kid. There's a really fantastic book and it's about stories from all of the islands in the Torres Strait. I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if we put these stories into songs? And then my mother said, no, there's songs that go with these stories. And so this journey of like how fascinating that we weave our stories into songs, into dances and so on. So that's at 10. Then fast forward and I become a singer and I don't think we were quite ready for how the Torres Strait language would be sort of put into an album. But I meet up with David Bridie and that concept becomes a real idea. So Stylin' Up was where we started injecting all of these songs. Marinated for about 20-something years and Waku comes out. And it's based on this song that I wrote with Don Walker, but the song got lost and we called it Walks Across My Weaving. Waku talked about the songs of my grandfather, which came to me on a documentary that I was doing about, my life and the ancestors. My grandfather's songs were in Canberra at IATSIS in this really beautifully kept archived artefacts, and lo and behold there's Nadi Anu, and so the idea came to do the songs of my grandfather, and that's how Waku was born. Saibai Island is 1 metre above sea level, and when the seas are rising, which they are, Saibai sinks. 50-something years ago, Grandad and the rest of the clans and family men all said we have to go to higher land, and that meant that 10 families ended up saying yes, we'll do this, and then it felt important to follow that journey from Saibai to Muttee Head and then to Bamaga. And all of this is reflected in the words of my grandfather's songs. It all became so real for me, and so I just wanted people to see what that significance was for the songs. And it's been a beautiful journey just discovering all of this music that my grandfather made about his time on the sea, his love of the sea, his love of his island home, and how the winds and the stars would take him away but then back home again. It was quite beautiful, and as I've been singing his songs, I've realised he really used his words as an imprint for his great-grandchildren that will never meet him, to say, well, this is what the Torres Strait Island is to all of you who'll probably never get to understand his journey on the sea. I've been trying to work with David Bridie for such a long time since that album, but there was never the right project. Styling Up needed to marinate for 28 years to kind of get to this evolution of what I think it is that Waku is. Waku is sort of like not the biggest sister, but it's the ancestor of. David and I had a lot of get-together sessions of like, now get these pieces of information, and what it ended up being was a family reunion. Everybody that played on the first album, we got them together again, Uncle Jensen being one of those important factors of what the album needed to sound like, because Granddad's language at the time, we speak differently now. We probably have for want of a better explanation, a watered-down version of the Saibai dialect. And when Jensen was talking about these songs, he would get really emotional about the metaphors of what the language means. I think we've produced a beautiful album, and it's been wonderful working with David.
Jensen has a academic's rigour about language. He would research and make phone calls and read up and say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to go away and find out. He gave a lot of confidence to Christine that these were her stories to tell. Few other people could sing these songs and own them like she could. So his involvement, his collaboration was vital. Recording records is a great way of recording language and it's a kind of a natural way of doing it. So, like people might say, "Oh, it looks really good that you recorded these songs in language," but it was like there was never going to be any other way of doing it. We weren't going to, translate them to English and sing them that way, because the way that Nadi sang them, the way that Underlay sang them, had a real beauty and authenticity to it. All of Australia is better for knowing that these songs that exist, that there's this depth of knowledge and culture and artistry in all the places where all the languages exist, where all the different mobs come from.
The most amazing thing about looking back at my first album is following in the footsteps of my grandparents, my grandfather, and all the songmen and women of the era who realised that it was, if we don't sing about what's happening in this time and place, our children won't know. So those songs that they were composing, is looking through the lens of what they were living at the time, and it's really important. It's important to keep preserving that oral tradition through writing songs, the same way that my grandfather did. I want the younger generation to feel proud. I'm hoping that it's become easier for people to express in their language. You can only preserve it if you're speaking it, if you're singing it. And that's what I'm doing with this album, preserving my grandfather's songs, but our language within it.